All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Nick Carrier's Best You podcast. I am super stoked today to have, for the second time, the one and only Alex Judd. Alex, I just want to start off by saying thanks for spending the time with me today.
Thank you. I'm super stoked as well, Nick. This is going to be fun, man.
Yeah, man. I can't even remember exactly what it was, whether it was a year and a half, 2 years ago or so, when I met you down at the Ramsey Solutions to interview you there.
Yeah, I had a job back then. A lot has changed since then.
I thought that you don't have a job now, but
that's true. People are like, "Who is this bum?" Like,
yeah, seriously. But yeah, we had an awesome conversation then, and I'm super excited about the stuff that we're going to jump into today. But let's go ahead and dive in to give people a little bit more explanation as to what you're talking about when you say you actually had a job then. You left. How long ago was it now?
It will be a year, June 1st.
Okay, a year, June 1st, you left Ramsey Solutions and started Path for Growth. Mm-hmm. So I just want to start off, I know we've talked about it in the past, but give people a little bit of a rundown as to what the reasoning and what the decision was like to kind of go off on your own and start your own thing.
Yeah, I had a guy send me a message on LinkedIn the other day, and literally, I never met this guy before. The message just said, "What the hell were you thinking leaving Ramsey Solutions?"
Oh my God.
Great to meet you too. So I appreciate you for asking the question a little nicer than that. Honestly, what I tell people a lot of times, like, it's one of the greatest organizations I've ever been around, period, right? Dave is one of the strongest leaders I've ever worked for. And so I wasn't running from anything at all. Like, I love that place, still love that place, love those people. It was just, I had this recognition, man, I think if I didn't step out to try and start and own my own business from the ground up, I would spend my entire life wondering what would have happened if. And it just made it so clear that that was the next right step. And then I started feeling gripped by this sense of calling around the idea that so often people who are in leadership positions, which I'm deeply passionate about, oftentimes don't know or haven't applied themselves to what it means to practice healthy growth. And the reason why I'm so passionate about that is because I've walked that path before as well, where it's toxic growth and it leaves you feeling weak, feeling drained, feeling burnt out, and you're actually not serving anyone well at all. And so what we say we do at Path for Growth is through training and speaking and coaching, we help impact-driven leaders practice healthy growth.
So what does toxic growth for people look like then?
Man, the biggest distinguishing factor is kind of part of what I just hit on is if you get to the end of a season of struggle, because struggle and growth often go together, right? But if you get to the end of a season of struggle and you are weaker, less strong, less healthy, and less capable or equipped to serve people than you were before that season, it's toxic struggle, right? And sometimes we say like, oh, I'm in the grind, I'm hustling, I'm doing all this. But in reality, it's all selfish based because it's like you are actually making yourself less able to serve others effectively. And so what I say is healthy is really rooted in that word humility, right? What is humility? It's to have an accurate viewpoint of oneself. So it's saying that I have dreams, I have aspirations, I also have incredible strengths and talents and gifts that I'm going to bring to the world. And at the same time, I am a human being, and therefore I am fragile, I'm feeble, I'm weak, and I'm limited. That doesn't mean that I can't do these things, it's just going to affect the way that I do these things. And I need to walk forward knowing that I'm a human being, but I can also work with other people, be hyper aware, hyper conscientious, and hyper humble of bringing my full self to the thing.
So I love that definition of humility, an accurate viewpoint of oneself, and it sounds like, that's what people need to work on and improve on in order to make sure that they're avoiding toxic growth, if you will. So how does one become more aware as to if that's what they're experiencing? Like, how do they know that when they're going through a period of struggle that they end up not as good at, not good, and they're not ending on the positive side of the things and they're not learning from it? Like, how does somebody know that?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly hard. And it's honestly one of the things that I'm focusing on a lot right now in my own life, because I got to a stage with this business where if you had asked me, probably from the months of September to December, if you would have asked me how things were going, I would have said, man, Nick, it's awesome. You probably did ask me, to be honest with you. I probably said, man, it's so awesome. Things are going great. We're growing. Number of clients is expanding. I'm thinking of hiring my first full-time person. And I was talking to this guy and I was having conversations with this person that I was thinking of bringing on board. And I said, man, things are just going really, really well. And they were going well externally. They really, really were. And like it was just hustling and moving and constantly like, what's the next thing, right? What's the next thing? And it wasn't until December, I had a trip with some friends get canceled. And so I ended up going to the beach by myself for 4 days and turned off my phone for 4 days.
Holy crap.
And it was a little bit terrifying. Like I put my phone, like turned it off, put it under a pillow in a separate bedroom, and I was like, okay, we're gonna turn off phone and computer and we're just gonna see how this goes. And it was crazy how after doing that, I just had this like, I started to breathe again. And then I had this recognition, like, I am so stressed out right now.
Yeah.
Like so uptight. And the reason why I was able to realize that I was so uptight is because it felt like for the first time in 90 days, I was taking deep breaths again. Like diaphragmatic breaths that go beyond shallow level. And it's like, that's kind of odd, you know? Yeah. And I even noticed I was actually, this is a weird thing to say as a 29-year-old, but I've actually done some research on it, and cortisol levels actually affect this. Like, I was actually losing some hair. And thankfully it's all grown back. I'm thrilled about that, but it's like my stress levels had gotten out of control and I was living in a state of complete unawareness of it. It's like, holy cow, what's going on? And so that was this wake up moment for me. It's like, man, you are literally growing because you feel like you have to grow, because you feel like you're perpetually behind, because you're placing these self-imposed goals and aspirations that if I don't hit this by this time, then I'm not growing and I'm not doing what I should be. And I own the thing. It's like, why are you stressed out right now? And that's what people should hear. You are your worst boss, right? Like the voice in your head, you would never talk to anyone else that way, but you talk to yourself that way, right? And so I had to step back and say, like, I'm not doing this anymore. I refuse. And I'm so grateful that happened in December, 6 months into the business, because now I've got this perspective. It's like, man, if we grow, that's awesome. And I'd love to grow, and I love to move the business forward, and we are growing, thankfully. And at the same time, if we grow 1% next month, we're also going to be okay. Yeah. And the reason why we're going to be okay is because we're all having a blast. Before, I wasn't having a blast.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot there. We can get to the treating yourself better and talking to yourself better. That's real too. And Dr. Jordan Peterson's, we're going to dive into some of Dr. Jordan Peterson's work. But before we do, I think that is something that a lot of people who are listening right now and I have experienced, because we are people who aim high. We are people who are ambitious and we have goals and stuff. We get so caught up into the thick of things that we lose perspective. Because I know for me personally, like the funniest thing happened before COVID started. I had like all these sticky notes around like on my desk, on my wall and stuff. And then I went to Atlanta for 9 weeks when COVID hit, and I came back and sat down and like looked at all the sticky notes, and I was like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, why did I think that was so important?
Though, that's a big deal.
No, so that's what I'm saying. So like, how can we not have to have the experience of COVID happen, or the experience of plans getting canceled and you having your phone off for 4 days? How can we not have to wait on something like that in order to gain perspective, and how can we keep perspective on a regular basis?
Dude, I love that question. The thing I always think back to is Grandma Williams is her name. She's my grandma on my mom's side. We were at dinner one time and my mom was talking about something, and Grandma Williams, once it gets past a certain hour, she can start to get a little bit snarky, and like she was trying to explain something that I guess, I can't remember the exact context of the story, but my mom I guess didn't grip what my grandma was trying to say, and my grandma just paused for a second and just goes, Amy, open your eyes. Open your eyes. Like I will never, like that is the exact tone that she said with. Open your eyes. And so that's the advice that I would give myself. Yeah. Alex, open your eyes. Open your eyes. And the words that I keep focusing on is pay attention. As a human being, you have an outrageous capacity for self-deception. Like you can convince yourself that you are all right if it is inconvenient or uncomfortable to recognize that you're not. And so, I mean, like, to my knowledge, human beings are the only creature on the planet that can build up entire realities in their mind that don't actually exist in front of them. And that's called denial, right? And so what we've got to do is we've got to pay attention. And so one really practical thing that I've started doing, and this is actually, I think I got it from Jordan Peterson. You're so much more respectful for me than me. You always say Dr. Jordan Peterson. I just say Jordan. But I think I got it from him. Every once in a while, I'll just journal my answer to the question, where am I being stupid right now? And I never don't have an answer. That's what's crazy. It's like I always find an answer. It's the question of how deep are you willing to go. The other thing I would say is living in community, and for me, having a counselor. And I have a counselor not because my life is falling apart. I have a counselor because people depend on me to be operating at my best. That's why I have a counselor, and because he helps me do that.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's an awesome question. I think it is a hard question to have the courage to ask yourself, because you're going to be revealed stuff that is just
where am I being stupid?
Yeah, where am I being stupid?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I mean, like the science behind the fact that your mind will block, like if you're an alcoholic, your mind will block you from answering that question truthfully.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that every addiction was once simply a bad habit.
Yeah.
And so,
it's kind of scary to think about sometimes.
It's scary, but it's also empowering, because it's like, okay, well, I can fix a bad habit.
Yeah, that's good.
And I can attack a bad habit, you know, and if I just open my eyes and pay attention and don't go 2 years without asking that question, I just see so often people create lives that they're miserable in, and if they would have addressed the hard things 18 months ago, they'd be in a much healthier spot.
Yeah. I completely agree. One of the things I want to kind of go back to that you said early on, because it really related with me, and I think it was insightful, is you talked about kind of if you had not left to do something on your own, you would have always wondered, like, what if? You always would have wondered, you always would have almost like felt this gap that like, I could have given more, I could have done more. And one of the things that I've said before to somebody who was like, kind of a past coworker, and I was leaving, and they were kind of asking me why, and I was like, I just feel like my highest contribution to the world is going to come from something that I create. And I don't know if that's like I don't mean for that to sound like arrogant or anything like that,
Arrogant. No, okay, pause real quick, because I think this is important for everyone to understand. You use the word contribution. By nature, you can't contribute from a posture of arrogance. So I don't think that's arrogance at all.
That's a good point. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But like on a deeper level, it's kind of like when you do your own thing, you get to completely define success for yourself, rather than if you work under someone or for people, you are essentially required to adopt what their version of success is on a daily basis. And I think that that's one of the things that we as humans need to do in order to get closer to the best version of ourselves, is we need to be required on a daily basis to define what success means for ourselves. Like, what does success mean for our health? What does success mean for our financial life, spiritual life, relationships, all that kind of stuff. And I think that oftentimes we don't get the opportunity to do that sometimes when we work within another company. And so I feel like one of the reasons why I felt that way is like I want to define success for myself rather than kind of adopting another narrative of success. And I don't know if that's anything that you relate to or anything that like makes sense, and if I don't know if I did a good job explaining that or what.
No, I think it's a great job. The thing that I would say related to that is I never want to demonize working for an organization, because I believe that sometimes, and I don't know what my life is going to look like 20 years from now. It could be, and neither do you, right? It could be 20 years from now, both Nick and Alex, their story of success involves working for an organization.
100%.
And it just happens that our story of success aligns so much with someone else's that we decide to go work for someone, right? Or with someone on something. I don't anticipate that's going to happen, but it might, right? You know, and so if you're working for an organization, the thing that you should ask yourself is exactly what Nick just said. is what is my definition of success, and how do I define success for myself, and does that align with the place that I'm walking into every day?
Yeah.
What I get so freaking irritated about is people that answer that question, that either don't have the guts to define it, number one, or answer that question no every single day, and then complain about their employer.
Yeah.
It's like, that person's paying you. And if you're complaining for more than 30 or 60 or 90 days, we live in this amazing place called the United States of America, and you can leave tomorrow.
Yeah.
And do them and do you a favor and do that, because as long as you stay in a place where you are allowing yourself to have a bad attitude, you are now the problem.
Yeah. No, and one of the things that I think about in regard to that is you almost don't have the right to complain if you don't do anything about it, right? You know what I mean? Like, if you're not taking responsibility for doing what you can to change that, whether you're just trying to make your situation at work better, or whether you're moving to a different company, like, you almost like don't have the right to complain if you're not doing everything you can. And that's kind of like one of my whys every single day, and almost like my biggest fear is that I'm not doing everything that I potentially can do in order to get closer to the best version of myself. And that's almost like why I don't feel like I would ever have any right to complain if I am not doing everything I could do.
Yeah, I had this thought at Ramsey that was entirely impractical, like most of my thoughts are. But I was like, man, wouldn't it be awesome? Like, there used to be a time when the CEO would sign your check and hand it to you. And I just thought to myself, I wonder how much that would change the dynamic of people in a company if they literally didn't get it direct deposit, if they literally received the check from their leader and said thank you. You know, and I've got, our company's entirely remote, so I'm not driving around the country to deliver people's checks, but it's just like, I think that's helpful for me to remember, and it was really helpful whenever I worked there. It's like, this person is signing my check, and so I'm going to contribute to their mission all the way up into the point where I'm not, and I'm so grateful I had that posture, because there was so much when I was deciding whether or not I was going to stay or be an entrepreneur. There was so much that I learned in the time because I did not allow myself to wallow in negativity, right? And I didn't allow myself to complain because, number one, it wasn't true. Like, there was so much stuff to be grateful for and positive about there. It's bonkers. But then number two, it's like you miss out on lessons whenever your mind is focused on what you're angry about.
Yeah, so true. So I want to dive into a little bit of Jordan Peterson.
Our boy Jordan, right?
Jordan's work.
Maybe he'll come to the next one that we record. Let's make that happen.
Oh my God.
Or I'll take a road trip to Canada with you if we can organize that.
Oh my gosh, I would go today. I would drive right now. So,
do your listeners know who he is, do you think?
I've talked about him before, but
some of my clients, they're like, I feel like I've heard him before because you talk about him so much.
There's going to be people who don't,
yeah,
for sure. If you don't know who he is, then you need to just like pull up YouTube one time. But he's the author of 12 Rules for Life and
clinical psychologist. I think he's probably
best minds of our time.
Yes, that's the right phrase.
I've heard you say that, and I've said it before too. I completely agree. Like, I think he's, people talk about Aristotle, talk about Plato. Like, I think he is literally in that conversation. Anyways, you talked about it earlier, how we speak very negatively to ourselves, and that's something that I experience a lot with people in their fitness goals. Like, people always treat themselves like crap, and that's something that I've talked about with some guests on my podcast who are also in the health and fitness space. And I kind of wanted to talk about his rule number 2 in 12 Rules for Life is treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. And he talks about how, Carl Jung is somebody who he learns a lot from, and Carl Jung's thoughts on the golden rule of love your neighbor as yourself. He says that this means embracing and loving the sinner who is yourself as much as forgiving and aiding someone else who is stumbling and imperfect. Because a lot of times we're going to treat somebody else who we see as stumbling and imperfect very well, but then when we do it, we just crush ourselves.
That's right.
So how can we begin to give ourselves a little bit more permission to be imperfect?
Yeah, well, I would not say that I figured this out yet, right? This is something that it's probably perpetually in progress, and I think that's part of it. Allow yourself to be perpetually in progress, right? Mm-hmm. But then the other thing that I would say, it's so fascinating in the one-on-one coaching that we do. I mean, there's people in our program that own $60 to $90 million businesses. And this is probably the rule of Jordan Peterson's that I refer to the most. I mean, they're CEO of a $90 million business, and we're spending time saying, you need to treat yourself as someone you're responsible for helping.
Crazy.
And because they have taken responsibility for everyone else. And what I think we all need to understand, and this is what I'm constantly having to learn in this season, is you can be responsible to people, you cannot be responsible for people. And so what does that mean? Well, and this applies to your personal relationships too. I am responsible to properly communicate my expectations, to properly understand their expectations, to set clear boundaries, to make sure we know where we're going, to make sure that we're constantly understanding and talking to each other, right? To communicating effectively, all of that stuff. I'm responsible to that. They are responsible for meeting those expectations. They are responsible for staying within the boundaries. They are responsible for winning, all of this stuff. And the minute I try to take responsibility for them doing that, I'm actually taking responsibility from them. Yeah. I'm stealing it. I am robbing their opportunity to be an individual. Wow. Right? And so you can't do that, but then also we don't take responsibility for ourselves and say like, man, I need to take care of me. And it turns out that's a really hard commitment. Like managing me is if I can figure that out, my business is a cakewalk. And I really mean that. That's why, honestly, Nick, I've thought about this before. I think you're going to thrive in business strictly because you're establishing yourself as someone that can take care of Nick really well. And I would imagine Nick's a pretty hard person to take care of, right? I mean, and like, so you can establish order and disciplines and rhythms and routines for yourself. It's just in the business world, we call it systems and processes and structures, right? That's all we call it. And so that's number one. Then the second thing is the question I always end up asking those clients is, okay, you've told me this entire situation, and a lot of it is revolving around the things that you're struggling with and the issues that you have in your mind associated with moving forward or things like that. If your daughter or son came to you in this exact position, facing this exact problem, what advice would you give them? And the advice that they would give their daughter or son is so radically different than the advice they allow themselves to accept. And I mean, I've had people cry before talking to their sometimes even imaginary daughter and son because they start to come face to face with the fact that I don't live in accordance with the way I think other people should be treated. And it's like, that's a crazy concept.
That is a crazy concept. And it's so true. Actually, a podcast guest a couple of episodes ago, who's also, he mainly works in nutrition, but one of the things that he always talks about with his clients is how we all have a bully in our brain. It's funny, but it's so true. And the thing that I really resonated with that you said is that you can be responsible to people, but you're not responsible for people, because one of the things that I have found myself sometimes struggle with is when I have clients who are working towards a fitness goal and they like don't follow through on all their workouts or all their nutrition for 1 week. I'm like, I feel like I've personally failed. I'm like, it frustrates me so much, it eats at me, and I'm continually trying to work on that of like, look, I can give them all the tools, I can give them the advice, I can give them kind of the strategy, but ultimately, like, they have to follow through.
Yeah.
They have to be the ones to execute. Like, I can try to set them up for success as much as possible, but at the end of the day, it's got to be up to them. And like you said, you don't want to take responsibility for them because then you're taking it away from them as well.
Yeah.
And I think that was super powerful. One of the things that I know a lot of people struggle with is also kind of along the same lines is they don't realize that they have to, kind of like we talked about earlier, like fill their own cup up before they help other people. Like, I forget exactly what you said, but if you're not like the best version of yourself, then you're not going to be able to contribute to other people maximally. So what can we do to realize that and almost be incentivized that is the most important thing first. Because like you said, if you can take care of yourself, then you're going to be able to take care of your business, or you're going to be able to take care of other people. How can we incentivize ourselves that is the thing that we have to do first and realize that's not selfish?
Yeah. One of our core values at Path for Growth is strength is for service, right? And you should be outrageously strong, outrageously, incredibly, remarkably strong. And then you should go spend all of that strength. You should literally give it away, right? But I think so often, like you said, we operate from a posture of weakness, and then we serve out mediocrity.
What do you mean we serve from a posture of weakness?
Like, we serve from a posture of weakness in that I would say, let's talk about what that looks like. I would say that looks like reaction mode. So it means, part of taking responsibility for yourself, right? We can do the whole compassion, like bullying your brain. Yes, that's all true. We should tell the bullying brain to shut up. And at the same time, get out of bed. Yeah. Like, get out of bed at 5:30 or 6, or right, I'd never prescribe a time for someone, because some of you have kids and I don't have kids right now, and I heard that changes things a little bit, right? But like, go to bed at a reasonable time, get out of bed at a reasonable time, stop eating crap, drink water, do some push-ups in the morning or some burpees in the morning. Like, take care of yourself, because then when you get to 7:30, you're not weak, you're strong. Right, and you can show up, and there's so many people that show up to 7:30, and all they can do is consume. All they can do is take from people, because they have not correctly postured themselves to give. You have nothing to give at 7:30 if you woke up at 7, right? Like, you can't. And so, do you want to contribute, or do you want to consume? Yeah. And so this is where, like, when I think about this rule, there are times where I need to be outrageously compassionate and gracious and kind to Alex, right? And there are times where I need to just say, Alex, stop being so damn weak. Yeah. Like, just get out of bed. And the thing that I am in process of learning right now is how to modulate between the two, and how to recognize what voice is proper at what time.
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it on the head, and I think our society is getting on the softer side of things, like be more self-compassionate, and it's almost like too far that way. Where it's like, no, like, get your ass out of bed, like you said. For
self-care.
Wanting to throw some more words in there.
But the phrase self-care is starting to drive me crazy. And I get it.
Like, self-love is the thing that pisses me off.
Oh my gosh. Go serve someone. Go do something that adds outrageous value to someone else, and realize that you leave that 10x more energized than you leave some spa that you spent at for 3 days by yourself. I have nothing against spas, right? But meaning and struggle go hand in hand. They are always inextricably intertwined. And so don't expect to go to the spa for 3 days, not talk to anyone, not do anything related to contribution, and find your calling. It's not. It will not happen. And there's a culture today that says, oh, you just need to get away. You need to go sit on a blanket and just meditate for 7 days straight about what your calling should be. No, calling is found in progress, right? Calling is found in action. And by the way, calling is today. Right, get in on what God is doing today, because that's what you're called to do. Yeah, just get a little passionate about this.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. This is kind of along the same lines of that, but I think that from a practical standpoint, in order to get closer to the best version of ourselves, like we're currently here, right? If we're looking at a graph, we're currently here, and the best version of ourselves is up there. Quite literally, that best version of ourselves has things, has skills, has knowledge, has experiences that this person does not yet have. Yeah. And to me, the way that we live into that person, the way that we become that person, is we wander into chaos. Is not, we don't completely throw ourselves into it, we wander in it and dip our toe and see what I said the other day to somebody, what our capability threshold is like, we have to toe the line of what we're capable of and what we're not capable of. And one of the quotes in his book is, living things are always found in places that they can master, surrounded by things or situations that make them vulnerable.
Oh.
And so
that's why I love this guy.
Yeah, it's money. It's money. So what are things that people can do daily, weekly, monthly basis to try to challenge themselves to toe that line?
Yeah.
So that they do actually acquire skills, knowledge, experience that get them closer to the best version of themselves.
Yeah, I always find when I talk about this, like, to first of all define chaos the way Jordan Peterson defines chaos. Chaos is not strictly anarchy, right? Chaos is the uncertain, the ambiguous, right? The place where you feel insecure, the place where you may look like a fool, right? But you have to look like a fool en route to becoming a master.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, right? So I love that you articulate, like, it's the force that mediates between order and chaos. That's where the money happens, right? That's where you get really, really good.
Well, and that's what and sorry to interrupt you, but that's what he says. Like you said that stress and meaning are always intertwined.
That's right.
And that's where he's like, if you can continually find that hot spot, find that zone, that's where ultimate meaning lies throughout your life. If you can continually spend time in that zone.
That's right. And so what I challenge people to sometimes do, and this is just a helpful practical exercise, is first of all, just understand where you are, right? It's what we were talking about earlier. You have to have an accurate understanding of what is reality as it stands today. Mm-hmm. And this is related to your perception. So on a scale of 0 to 10, if 0 is total order, right? My entire life is systemized, routine, it's outrageously consistent, it's just a series of habits. I clock into an 8 to 5 job, I eat this every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Like it's filled with structure and rhythm and routine. Let's call that a 0. 10 is chaos. Everything is uncertain, everything is ambiguous, there's no structure, there's no rhythm, there's no routine, there's no habits, right? It's all craziness. Where do you land? Think about where do you land. Because if you live too much on the 0 side of things, you will become complacent, right? And then someone that lives at the 10 side of things, there's a phrase for that, it's called a train wreck, right? Or a dumpster fire, right? You don't want to be there. What would it look like for you to be at a 4 or a 5? Right? To where, okay, I've got structure and rhythm and routine in the things that matter most. I make my bed every single morning. I drink 32 ounces of water. I've got a specific friend that I meet with once a week, or my spouse and I have a date night once a week, or I go to church on Sundays, or I read 10 pages a day. Those are the things that you can depend on, that you're anchored in, that you know if everything else goes crazy, you've got those things that you can always come back to. And that does a lot for your heart, right? To have something that you can recenter yourself. Prayer is an incredibly orderly, rhythmic thing that you can invest yourself in. And what does that do? That grants you the ability to courageously wade into chaos. And so have the guts to go do the thing that makes you uncomfortable. Have the guts to go talk to a stranger. Have the guts to maybe bootstrap a business. Have the guts to start a podcast. Have the guts to start writing a book. Have the guts to sit down with someone that you've never met before and just say, can I really admire you? Can I ask you a bunch of questions? Right? Have the guts to do that thing that you're like, man, this is going to demand a lot from me, but your order, all the things that you do every day have earned you the ability to do that. And so, like, you're not going to write a book at the end of your life about all the rhythms, routines, and structures and habits you have. Yeah. You're going to write the book about the risks that you took. And the people that value you the most and that love you the most, they're going to remember you from the way, not just that you were incredibly consistent, they will remember that, but show some boldness, show some courage. There's something that you are called to that's been in the back of your head that's time to bring to the forefront of your mind and say, what would it look like just to start doing that a little bit?
There's something that you said in there that your rhythms and routines and your habits provide you the ability to step out into courage and to be bold. I think that's so profound, because the people who don't have, if you don't have a solid foundation, if you don't have the solid routines set up for certain areas of your life, if you try to step out on a limb and things don't go super well, or even if they don't go perfectly, then you could crumble. Like, I think you have to have that solid foundation of routines and habits and systems set in place to allow you to, if things don't go super well, you don't crumble.
That's right. And so what's cool about that is, regardless of who we're talking to, whether you're the most habitualized person on the planet or you're not, there's chaos in your life.
Yeah. And
so all of our responsibility is to take chaos and subdue it into order. take that bed that looks like a mess all the time and make it every morning.
Yeah.
Then suddenly, what does that do? That earns you the ability to do something a little bit more, right? We recorded a podcast episode on our podcast that was all about morning routine, right? And I'm sure you've done one of these as well. It's one of the highest performing podcasts we've done. It's the one people talk about the most. And I have a morning routine that is several steps long now, which has just been incomprehensibly valuable to me. Mm-hmm. But it did not start there, right? You start with making your bed. Yeah. And then you start with, after you make your bed, you drink 32 ounces of water. And then once you establish that as a habit, you start doing 15 burpees, right? And you just stack and stack and stack and stack till one day you have this outrageous morning routine, but start with the first thing and bring that into order, and that's your bed.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that he talks about, Jordan Peterson talks about, is if somebody is constantly depressed or constantly anxious, it's sometimes easy to get them out of that if their go to bed time and their wake up time is just all out of whack. Because, actually from a biological perspective, your mood is very much tied to your circadian rhythm. And so if all that is all thrown off, then it's going to affect you, but also just from that structured point of view. And then the other thing I thought about when you were saying is that there is a thing called decision fatigue. If you have to continually make decisions all day long, then you're going to be set up for failure by the end of the day. But if you continually have these systems and routines and habits set in place, it gives your mind more space and more freedom to be able to execute at a higher level when chaos does ensue.
That's right. I haven't told you about this yet, but it is a decision I've made in the past 2 weeks. I am trying to distill everything I own into being able to live out of one Rubbermaid bin. Yeah, right. Someone asked me, does that mean you're living in the Rubbermaid bin? No, I'm not going to live in a Rubbermaid bin, right? But there's many reasons why that's hyper lucrative to me and why I feel like I've thought about it, prayed about it, feel called to do that in this season. But one of those reasons is because there's enough things I need to make decisions on right now. The t-shirt I'm going to wear doesn't need to be one anymore. And so I'm just going to go buy, and I've already done it, a bunch of black V-neck t-shirts, and I'll wear that every day, right? Because it's I can remove that as something that's on my mind. What am I wearing tomorrow? And it's not like I was losing sleep over what am I wearing tomorrow, right? But it was something that I was expending thought process on that is no longer, and I'm eliminating a lot of those things now. And I've just begun the process of getting there. Over the course of the next month, I'm hopefully going to be in a Rubbermaid bin, not me physically, but I'm already experiencing the freedom that provides, because simplicity equals freedom.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think people listening to the podcast are necessarily going to go buy a Rubbermaid bin and try to do the same thing. There might be a couple out there, but that's why laying out your clothes the night before is so powerful. It's just, again, the decision fatigue thing. The more you can make the trivial things habitual and not require brain processing power, then the more you're going to be set up for success.
Because it becomes order.
Yeah.
And order gives you the ability to step into more chaos. And so, the example that he used that really made this concept click for me is Marines, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers. They go into the most hostile environments on the planet. Nothing is predictable. Why do you think they're so outrageously, incessantly obsessed with your pants have to be pleated the right way, your shoes have to be shined the right way, your bed has to be made? Yeah. Because it does something for your soul when you realize there are things I can't control. Although I may not be able to control anything out there, there are things in here that I actually can control. And so, that's one of the trainings that we teach is ownership mentality. And we say to have an ownership mentality is to decide to be ruthlessly responsible for the things you can control. And the minute you make that decision, what you start to realize is, I can actually control a lot.
Yeah.
There is so much in my life personally right now, I'm talking as me, in my life personally right now, that I can control that I'm not yet.
Yeah.
And that's crazy, because that's outrageous opportunity for growth.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, man. Well, I just could not agree anymore. Well, down to the last couple questions, Alex. You said you mentioned during the podcast you're 29. Let's say you're 31, 2 years down the road, and I'm not going to ask you what your specific goals are, but let's say you've achieved a lot of the goals that you have. Your business is thriving. You have more clients. You have all your stuff in a Rubbermaid bin. You're speaking more and more like you want to. Envision that 31-year-old version of yourself. What are the habits that person has that you don't currently have?
I don't know that I have a direct answer to this question, and the reason why is because the current season that I'm in right now is the greatest season of contentment I've ever experienced. And like, I am just so thrilled and happy and delighted to be where I am today. And like, I wake up and the primary emotion that I feel is gratitude. And it's not because everything is going great there. I mean, we had some problematic issues today that we had to deal with that were a little bit irritating and frustrating. And at the same time, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And so I've had this mindset in the past that I now view as toxic, which was that contentment equals complacency. And because I know we're talking to really driven people, because you don't listen to a podcast called freaking Best You unless you're a very driven person, right? I want you to hear that if you've ever heard that voice that says, if you become content, then you will also become complacent, that is an absolute lie. Like, that is not true. Because what does contentment means? It means the ability to be grateful and present and here right now. That doesn't sound like complacency at all to me.
Yeah.
And some of the people that I most admire in this planet have this ability to be outrageously content and incredibly growth oriented at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, because I'm trying so much to detox from the past mindset of contentment equals complacency and to just be willing to be content and present, I'm spending less time probably than I ever had in my entire life thinking about what are my personal goals at 31 and what are my personal habits at 31. Because what I really want them to be is just what I'm supposed to be doing at that time. Mm-hmm. Because the reason why I'm content at 29 is the habits and the rhythms and routines. I'm not perfect at it, but they're what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Mm-hmm. I have no clue what that's going to look like at 31. But what I want is, I want to be someone that is known by others as being outrageously generous, as being incredibly present, and as being so beyond glad to be 31 that he could care less about what's going to happen at 33. That's not a direct answer to your question, but that's where I'm at.
No, dude, I like it. I think the right answer to the question is the answer you give. That's good. Well, before I ask the last question, Alex, I just want to acknowledge you for you doing consistent work on yourself and doing consistent humility work, gaining more awareness of who you truly are. And, you know, it's like you said, it's so important to do so that you can serve others at the highest level and serve others maximally. And you continue to do that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And so I think that's the way that you do it is just superb.
Well, dude, I think I told you this before, but like, one of the inspirations for leaving what was an incredible career and an incredible job in an organization to leave to bootstrap my own thing, like, one of the inspirations was you, because like, I saw you every single day as someone that is like, man, he's doing it, right? And he's taking this thing from the ground up. And I just want to let you know, like, I have so much respect for that. Like, the person that can literally say, I'm going to take this thing that didn't exist, Best You, right? And out of that, I'm going to create fitness courses and classes and a podcast and a brand and a network of people and live events. Like, none of that would have ever happened or existed if you didn't say, I'm going to go do that. And I saw that and I was like, well, if he can do it, I feel like maybe I could do that too. And so I know you provide that inspiration to me, and I know you've done that for others as well. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, man. That means a lot. That means a lot. Well, I know if you guys don't follow Alex, you're gonna go want to. So make sure you follow him on Instagram at Judd on the Run, and you can follow Path for Growth at Path for Growth, and make sure you check out their podcast as well. Is there any other, and there's pathforgrowth.com, y'all's website. Is there any other good place that people should go to learn more about you guys and support you?
Yeah, we're about to have this killer guest. I can't believe he was willing to be booked on the podcast, but his name is Nick Carrier on the Path for Growth podcast. So we'd love for you to come check out that episode specifically.
Awesome stuff, man. Well, last question is, I've asked you it before. I didn't go back to see what your answer was, but I'll be interested to compare the two at the two different seasons of life in which I've interviewed you. But I think that getting closer to the best version of yourself is a constant journey. I don't think we're ever at that best version. And I also think it's a very unique journey. I think the way that I'm going to get closer to the best version of myself is very different than the way that you're going to get closer to the best version of yourself. So for you personally, if there are 3 things that you can currently do, or 3 things that you can currently work on to get closer to the best version of Alex Judd that you could possibly be, then what are those 3 things that you could currently do or currently work on?
3 things. I would say the first thing would be do consistently what you're currently doing occasionally. And so specifically related to other people in the community that I find myself in right now, I think if I'm not careful, I can talk at people instead of talking with people, and I can be a presenter instead of being a person. And I'm seeing more and more as our business grows and I'm required in a professional capacity to be a presenter, it's really, really, really freaking important for me to also have people that I can just be a person with. And I've started to really create habits and rhythms where I do that occasionally. And so I think number 1 is the best version of myself does that consistently. Like I've got my go-to people that are that consistently. Number 2, I would say mitigating or eliminating fear-based decision making. And then number 3, is living in such a way that I acknowledge grace exists. Man, I don't remember my answer to that question last time either.
I can probably 1,000% guarantee you it was not exactly that.
No, but I remember thinking to myself, like, this seems like a question that I should always ask myself, and I don't. And like, it's just such a powerful thing. Like, specific questions yield specific answers, and when you actually have the guts to ask yourself that question, like everyone that listens to your freaking podcast should ask themselves that question and hold yourself accountable to writing it down. That's why I pause, because it's like, gosh, Nick, I haven't thought about 3 things. You're putting me on the spot, So, man, that's healthy for me. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Well, it's funny, when I asked the question and you paused, it brought me back to when I asked it the first time. And what I really remember more than almost anything from the last podcast that we did was how thoughtful and intentional you were behind every single word that you spit out. And that's one of the things that Jordan Peterson talks so much about is like, be careful with your word, don't say words that make you weak, and I think that's something that you continually live by. But that's all we got today, man. I really appreciate it, and good having you back on.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate you.